7 o'clock. Is it Nick? We're on? Great. Good evening, everyone. It is Monday, September 11th, 2023, and it's 7 o'clock. This is the Hanover Hanover Selectboard, and we have an agenda today, which I'll go over shortly. I did want to just take 20 seconds to comment that today marks the anniversary of 9/11, which is a day that forever changed our nation, and just wanted to take a moment to remember and honor the lives lost and the resilience of the American people. And I think it's one of those moments that everybody remembers where they were. We have an agenda which we'll start to follow here. Agenda review is the third item on here. So we've already done number 1, which is call to order. Number 2 is I'm going to open a public meeting to consider lowering the speed limit and school zone speed limit on Lyme Road, which is something we've been talking about for a little while now. And as a way of background, who's best to address this background for this? What is being addressed is the speed limit and the school zone speed limit between the two roundabouts on Lyme Road, Route 10, and primarily to the current speed limit is 30, which means that the school zone speed limit is, somebody help me, is it 20? 20.
Yes.
20. So what is under proposal here is to lower the speed limit in the whole between the roundabouts from 30 down to 20 miles per hour.
25.
And 25.
Almost had it.
I'm close. I'm close. It takes a village here.
We'll say 20.
And consequently, and this is where I need a little bit of help. By state statute, the school zone limit is 5 miles per hour lower than the 10 miles per hour lower than the speed limit. So therefore, this school zone speed limit will be 15. And I assume that is when the lights are during school hours when the lights are blinking. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's 15 minutes after drop-off and 15 minutes after pickup.
If the lights don't blink all the hours at school.
Yeah.
Understood. And the speed limit between those hours reverts to 25. Before we open this up to the public, and this is a public hearing, we want to hear from folks. I would like board members to chime in as we wish. Jenny?
Sure. Hi, thanks everyone for coming. So between those two roundabouts, I just want to set the stage. We all know there's a middle school. It's 0.7 miles between the Kendall roundabout and the Reservoir roundabout. We have 4 bus stops. We have 1 mid-block crossing. We have 2 senior living facilities. We have 1 daycare. We have 1 middle school, about 360 students. Principal Boyle will know probably how many exactly. We have 27 different curb cuts or intersections. We have 794 parking spaces off this stretch. We have 2 emergency centers with our fire and police centered there. We have a school drop-off zone on this stretch. And then we have these bike lanes that start and stop around the school that accommodate the drop-off zones. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and there's a lot of stuff going on not just with the middle school, but also a lot of stuff going on after the middle school. Very active middle schoolers who do a lot of plays, they do a lot of musicals, they have a lot of dances, they do a lot of sports, and they eat a lot of cookies at the place across the street at Cunning's Corner. And there's a lot of activity with them, and there's a lot of activity with the seniors and the bus stop and the grad students that come down from that area as well. The other thing I want to point out is just like there's I was really happy to see that there's not a speeding problem, and speeding is defined as going a significant number of people going above the speed limit. And that would be, very dangerous, especially given all the things going on. But what's also important is what that speed limit is and what the speed is. And 5 miles an hour can make all the difference in the world of whether people sustain life-threatening injuries that could be fatal or life-altering. And this range between 20 and 30 miles an hour dramatically increases your chance of dying. So I just wanted to say that, and that's why a lot of the thinking today is around schools and around other busy places where people work, live, and play. That we're not just looking at speeding, that we're looking to set context-appropriate speed limits. And so that's why I think this is very important that we have this set at a sort of saner level, given all the activity that goes on here.
Great, thank you, Ben, Jenny. Anyone else on the board before we open up to the public?
I'll talk after.
Okay, great. And we will have a chance to talk after. So I'd love to open this up to the public to discuss this issue. If anyone wants to speak to that, please, in the back. If you could come up, there's a microphone here. If you kindly just let us know your name and where you live. What
Laura
town?
Acker, I live on Greensboro Road, and I want to thank you all very much for taking this, taking public comment and addressing this issue. It's been a while since I've had middle school kids, but I think 2 years ago I was volunteering with the middle school cross-country team, and I was actually sort of appalled at the crossing the road issues we had. You would think that by middle school kids are more aware of it, but it was kind of eye-opening a couple times. Actually, the cops saw us trying to cross and stopped traffic for us to cross, even though we were at a crosswalk. And kids don't pay attention to crosswalks all that often. But I think there's a huge difference, and I think that we need to think about being proactive. Is that the word, proactive? Like, let's get something done before something bad happens. The middle school hasn't been out there all that long, but I think that it's only a matter of time. And given that there are a lot of sports activities, a lot of runners, bikers, and the crew team head out that way. Not to mention, I was going to say Trumbull Dawson, but that's not what I mean. The Krell and the
Kendall?
thank you, Kendall. And if we want to encourage, which I think we all do, want to encourage more biking and walking and such, it's really important for parents to feel like their kids are going to be safe doing it. And that drop-off zone is, I can admit that I've acted sort of poorly as a parent there. It's really hard, I think, to enforce anything there, but I think it would just set a good precedent. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Other folks want to step up? Please.
Tim Boyle, I'm the principal of the Richmond Middle School. This is my 5th year there, and I think that the lowering of the speed limit would be really helpful to sort of contextualize that piece of stretch of the road. We see a number of, last year we had a crossing guard who couldn't continue, so I served as a crossing guard for about 3 months in the morning and the afternoon. And what you see is people who are going north sort of stay within a regular speed zone until they get past the rotary, and then in their minds they're basically on their way to Lyme. So people would come through that intersection significantly faster than the 20 miles an hour. Same thing with people who are going south towards town. They don't really see themselves as in town until they hit the second rotary. And the difference, I think, anybody who's actually done it and driven through a school zone at 20 miles an hour, you don't realize how slow 20 miles an hour is until you're driving. And so people think that they're going relatively slowly, but really they're going about 35 miles an hour, would be my guess. And there's just so much traffic. We work really hard with the students and the parents and everybody else to make sure that everybody's aware. But on mornings when you have buses and delivery trucks to Dartmouth Printing and people who are getting agitated because they're late to work. It just makes it really difficult. And I think sort of lowering the expectations of how fast you can drive through there would be really helpful.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you very much. Please.
I was here
Yep.
2 weeks ago. I probably have a minority opinion, but my name is Rich Mengi, and I'm a former resident of Hanover. And my kids went through the Ray School, went through the Richmond School, went through all the improvements at the Richmond School. You know, I guess I'm thinking that you know, the memo from the staff has some kind of interesting things in there that that you don't really have the speed data to show that there's a speeding problem. You kind of admit that there probably isn't. I think there's a suggestion that there's a problem with pickup and drop-offs, and that's certainly something that I've experienced in terms of, you know, the number of parents that insist on bringing their kids to school, and we were kind of guilty of that as well at times. But I would encourage you to not lower the speed limit. I can give you an example of your neighbors to the north in Lyme, the speed limit all the way through town where we have a school, you know, 1st through 8th grade, way closer to the road than what you're experiencing at Richmond School. We also have a library across the street that the kids go to. We've got church, we've got stores, we've got restaurants, and it's 30 miles an hour all the way through there, except when you have school in session and the speed limit drops to 20 miles an hour. The reason I'm against the lowering is because I think you're increasing the access problems for Hanover. I have friends who live on the bottom part of Pineo Hill, and we were chatting about it recently. And even living as close as Pineo, they don't ever come into Hanover when they're going to go to Lebanon. They'll go up through and take Dogford and whatnot, just to avoid the congestion and the time it takes to get through Hanover. So I think as you're looking at you know, the town as a whole and the attractiveness of, you know, coming into town, impulse buys, participation in cultural events and whatnot, I think it's something that's not necessary to do. I think that, yeah, you could look at some of the core issues there. I think you could probably make some improvements to your sidewalks, but I'll point out that, you know, Lyme doesn't have any sidewalks, and it's 30 miles an hour from basically Bailey Farm out past the Congregational Church there. You know, I think that what this also does is you've got a problem in Etna with speeding issues. And, you know, traffic is kind of like a balloon. If you squeeze it here, it's going to pop out someplace else. And I mentioned before, you know, I live in the first property within the town of Lyme, and I butt Goose Pond Road. And, you know, over the years, and especially since COVID, you know, we've noticed a tremendous amount of traffic that's detouring and going through Goose Pond Road and then through Etna, where you're also experiencing traffic issues. So I'd encourage you to do the homework and, you know, look at what you can do to resolve some of the traffic pedestrian interface, and also, I think, frankly, look at how you are allowing parents to park on the road there. I think if parents had to park a distance away, perhaps they would use your school buses a little bit more often, that you pay one way or the other anyways. And so anyways, that was my 2 cents, and like I say, I hope you would study it a little bit further and not vote to approve or speed limit.
Thank you for your comments. Please.
Is it? Get up. Oh, sit down, go ahead, sit down.
You don't have to
You
sit,
don't
but
have
just
to
say your
sit,
name.
Just say your name, Jack.
My name is Jack Stinson. It's already 20 miles an hour, right? Posted.
During the school,
So you wanna make it
When it's blinking, when the lights are blinking.
when the lights?
it's 30, excuse me, go ahead.
So the issue is, you wanna make it all day, 20 miles an hour?
No. Between the roundabouts, the proposal is to make it, it's currently 30 miles per hour,
Except for the school system.
except between when it's blinking, correct, and then it's 20. The proposal is to make it between the roundabouts 25, so that when the lights are blinking, school zone is active, it's
So you
15.
just wanna expand it a little longer? Is that?
No, it's just,
Go ahead.
it's just moving everything down 5 miles an hour
It's posted 20 right now, so
in the school zone.
in the school zone.
So
you want
it's 30 to 20 and we're going 25 to 15.
And
Okay.
Jack, that time of the blinking is only 15 minutes before school starts and 15 minutes after.
About-
Mr. Boyle, do I have that?
7:40 to 8:10 is I
7:40 to
believe when it's blinking, and then in the afternoons it's 2:45 to 3:15. It's a little bit different in the afternoons because we turn it on when the Ray School closes, because we have a number of students who walk up the hill from the Ray School
Right.
and cross right there at Cuttings and go into the neighborhoods, or pick up their cars that then come out of that, basically the parking lot road, which is another part of it is the pedestrians are difficult.
Just 1 second, I think
Yeah,
Mrs.
No,
Simpson.
no,
Well, could you come up so that we can capture your voice?
Sure. So yeah, the timing is, as I was saying, the pedestrians are obviously an issue, and they're the ones we're most worried about. There are some traffic issues that involve people turning onto Lyme Road, where slowing down the traffic would be helpful. It's just timing, and I'm not sure what the name of it is right now. I know that it changed, but Dartmouth Printing has a shift that ends at 3 o'clock. So we have a number of cars that are exiting there at the same time we have teachers and or parents who are also making that road. So a little bit more well-traveled than it is. Certainly if you go by at 10 o'clock, there's not that many people on Lyme Road at that point. But at those pinch points, would be helpful to have everybody slow down and sort of watch.
Thank you.
no, I have no problem 5 miles an hour. The issue though is, you're controlling and managing a site that has a lot of traffic. When they designed that, the architects, I mean, like, how many policemen or crossing guards do you have? None. How many do you have elsewhere? It's gonna cost you, it's costing you a 4-hour shift, 2 people, probably $60,000, $80,000 a year, 10 years, you're looking close to $1 million for crossing guards. Why don't you just move it so the buses go around the building rather than, nothing to do with the issue, but you're throwing a lot of, and the only other thing I'd like to bring up is the safety of the roundabouts. I came home at 11:30, 12:30, and I saw 2 motorcycles basically trashed on the side of the road because whoever, the engineer who designed that, put the sidewalk, the rims around the curve twice as high as a sidewalk on Main Street. So if you try to ease back onto it, you get a flat tire. So I think if you're talking about average age at Hanover of 93 and they're still driving, and you're coming around and they need to be tilted, whoever. That has nothing to do with
Do you
this.
refer to the northern one or the southern one?
They're both designed improperly.
Yeah, okay.
If you go to a New London or if you go to White River, where they have it, I mean, you guys were the first to adopt this. roundabout thing.
Yeah.
So it's probably just a mechanical thing, but they're done better elsewhere. And I always see cars pull over with flat tires, have to replace all floors. Minor thing.
White River Junction has gone crazy on roundabouts. They have some really nice ones down there.
Yep.
Yes, please.
The crossing guard we have one crossing guard in front of RMS. I'm not sure what they have at the race school, but it is budgeted and paid for out of RMS's budget. So that's something that we pay. It's not passed on to the town. That's a relatively new thing that has happened, but we've taken that on the last couple of years.
Except it's the same taxpayer.
Right, that's true. But I'm like, wait,
Just to remind you.
But it's not at the level that was mentioned.
That's not, yeah,
Thank you. I
appreciate that.
wasn't trying to be sarcastic.
No, that's true. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Rob, yes, please.
Rob Houseman, Great Hollow Road. I'm speaking in favor of this proposal. The data suggests that the average speed in this area is 26 miles an hour. So it's not a substantial change in the overall speed of the vehicles traveling. It's the safety of the kids during the pickup window that's critical here. And I don't wish to correct Jenny, but I think there are 2 mid-block crossings on this road.
Okay.
One in front of the fire station / PD
Right,
crosses
right,
over,
right.
and then one further down in front of Crown.
And that one's lighted as well, correct?
No.
You're right. You're right.
Because there's one in front of Coyotes.
But it's not mid-block.
That's right.
Yeah, I was thinking of Corral as a driveway, but it's actually
Okay, so
a
I
mid-block.
stand corrected.
Yeah, I
So
don't
there
know.
are 3 crosswalks
Like,
on this corridor.
Yeah.
I think that everyone benefits from, especially the kids will benefit from a stronger enforceable speed during the school pickup and drop off time. And I speak in favor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rob. Any other folks want to speak to this issue?
I had one person who wrote in.
Yep.
Because they couldn't come, or 2 people. It's Ben Steele and Lynn Sheldon. Wrote, we think it's a good idea to lower the speed limit on Route 10 in the vicinity of the Richmond School, but there's a possibility that will encourage more commuters to take Goose Pond, Rennie Road, and Hanover Center Road as an alternative. Therefore, we encourage the town to lower the speed limit on Hanover Center Road between Hanover Center and Etna Village from 35 to 30 miles an hour. This section of road receives a significant amount of traffic during commuting hours. Typically, there are over 150 cars per hour between 6 and 9 and 3 and 6. And he cites some NHDOT data. And he says, when these cars are going 40 miles an hour, which he says is typical on a straight section in the 35 mile an hour zone, it creates a safety concern for pedestrians and school buses. We often have to wait for several cars to pass in order to cross the road to retrieve the newspaper or mail. And cars traveling at 35 to 40 miles an hour create a significant amount of noise. The number of houses and driveways on this section of road make a speed limit of 30 miles an hour appropriate. We hope you will consider the speed limit reduction in addition to the one on Route 10, as they both represent a major route for commuters traveling from Lyme and points north to DHMC, businesses in Lebanon, and Route 89. Thank you for your consideration. Ben Steele, Lynn Sheldon, 276 Hanover Center Road in Etna. So.
Any further discussion from the public? Great. Board, any further discussion? So at this point, we're prepared to take action, we're prepared to take a vote, correct? Warning, so?
Yeah, we can close the public hearing.
Yes. I'd like to close the public.
Because he likes to use the
I've never,
gavel.
that was the first time I've used
Hey,
it.
well done, well done.
Yeah, we've had a lot of feedback from this, and there's a lot of issues. The overall traffic pattern is not a simple one. The problems in Etna I get comments on quite frequently, and is something we absolutely need to address. And I understand that this will have an impact on it, or likely to have an impact on it. And really want to get the Etna issue as safe as possible. I do think we can take this issue up independent of that. Is there a motion that we can
Yeah.
move on?
I move that we approve, oh, you're gonna give it to me, look at that. I move that we vote to lower the speed limit on Lyme Road between the two traffic roundabouts from 30 to 25 miles an hour and lower the school zone speed from 20 to 15 miles per hour.
I second that.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Board? Call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And ayes have that. Thank you, everyone, for coming to speak. And I thank you for everyone in the community who was engaged on this. These are very important issues that need to be done correctly and look at the whole picture. So we've moved on to I'd like to, we've done agenda review. Well, no, we haven't really. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do during agenda review. It's a new agenda item. Basically, we have business requiring discussion, business requiring action, and then reports. And I think this is going to be hopefully a fun and straightforward meeting. Agenda. So I'd like to move on to agenda item number 4. And I have a proclamation here, which I'd like to read into the minutes. This is recognizing Roger DeRise for 20 years of service and achievements working for the Hanover Department of Public Works. Whereas Roger DeRise began his career at the Hanover Department of Public Works on August 13th, 2003, and whereas Roger began his full-time employment in the Highway Department as a light equipment operator, Roger arrived with electrical experience and was utilized to assist with the beginning of the overhaul of the Hanover traffic signals. Roger was promoted to heavy equipment operator, where he became interested in operating the town's grader. Upon completion of his training, and with the retirement of the primary grader operator, Roger was promoted to take on the task. Through many years of practice and 2 graders, Roger developed unparalleled skills. Whereas Roger, as a grader operator, regraded Hanover's 40 miles of gravel roads nearly 50 times, close to 2,000 miles, during snow removal operations which occur in the parking areas and in town intersections after nearly every measurable snowstorm. Roger operated the grader, pulling snow into piles which were then removed like magic in over 1,000 nights. Roger also plowed and treated over 2,400 roadway miles during storms. Roger was an excellent metal fabricator, making sand screens, hitches, and various tools that made the public works run smoother. Whereas the town will miss Roger's smile, quiet, and humble demeanor, Roger will now enjoy spending more time hiking, snowshoeing, camping, riding a motorcycle, enjoying bluegrass, and taking trips with his family. Now therefore I, Authorization, on behalf of the Select Board, community members, and employees of the town of Hanover, do hereby issue this proclamation to Roger DeRise in recognition of his many achievements, and we extend our gratitude and appreciation to Roger DeRise for many years of exemplary service to the town. It's a lovely statement that I'm happy to read into the minutes. Thank you very much, Roger. It's employees like that that really make us proud.
2,000 miles.
Yeah, that was
2,000 miles, 20 years, 1,000 nights. That's
Right.
pretty impressive.
Yes. Halfway across the country. 2/3 of the way across the country. So now we're moving on to public comment. And to remind folks, the public comment policy that the board has is that anyone is welcome to speak on, although we do ask that if you are going to address an agenda item that's coming up later, then hold your words until then. And We do ask to limit folks to 5 minutes, and that's great. Is there anyone who would like to speak to public comment? David?
My name's David Vincelette. I live at 93 Lebanon Street in Hanover. I appreciate Athos bringing up the 9/11, that today is 9/11. I wanted to offer a prayer for the first responders who ran towards danger on that day 22 years ago. I was an infantry captain with 2 young children when the planes hit the World Trade Center. And it changed my life. Went on federal orders shortly after the towers came down. I was on federal orders for the rest of my military career. I'd like to start by saying this. Now been 15 months I've called for Alex Torpley to answer the fact that he's been hired by criminals to hide illegal dumping of poison in town waters and false imprisonment by Hanover and Dartmouth of American citizens. Now, I continue to attend these meetings because I have a sworn duty to serve the public and defend the Constitution from town officers who exceeded their authority and held human beings fenced into their homes. Hanover and Dartmouth have refused to answer questions about their illegal dumping of asphalt waste and coal tar on Hanover roads, adjacent to native streams and ponds. I hope the new college administration will soon begin to engage in conversation about Dartmouth's role in the asphalt waste recycling program, now that they've abandoned the program without apology or explanation. Polluting native waters was not the only crime committed against my family and friends. Hanover put us in an illegal prison and treated us as slaves in a concentration camp for 25.5 months. We were freed by the courts, but no one has taken responsibility for the acts of town officials. We have been patiently waiting for Hanover to begin answering questions as New Hampshire Constitution requires. The first remains: who authorized the dumping of asphalt waste contaminated with coal tar on town roads where it ran into town waters? So you all think you're above the law, you think you're above the people who you're supposed to serve. You don't think you have to answer questions. There was no warning to the public. Whoever authorized this poison to be put down. And this group, you as selectmen, you have a duty to examine what happened, not just to sweep it under the rug or into the brook. Not answer questions designed to find out information that we have a right to know.
Thank you, David. Is there anyone else who would like to speak during the public comment period? All right. We're going to move on to business requiring discussion. So we're going to open a discussion of the budget timeline and update, followed by the capital improvement plan committee appointments discussion, and then traffic safety updates. So, Alex, do you want to get us started on the budget timeline and update?
Sure. So we talked a little last time, thank you, about the budget, and we've got a couple new things that we're doing this year. We talked a little in the last meeting about the way that we're going to sort of filter in some of the priorities from the community through the recently completing master plan documents. We're trying to get some of the more backup documentation from that as well. I've got a folder with a whole bunch of reading material. I won't share the total number of pages because it's sort of intimidating, but it's a lot of good stuff. And so over the next, within the next couple of weeks, certainly by the end of the month, I will be able to share all those things with you all. There will also be, Athos and I talked a little bit last week. There'll be a sort of form or survey with a few questions on it for each of you that will be sort of identifying some of the long-term priorities and some of the short-term priorities. It's sort of a couple steps that I've gone through with groups before where we do a little bit of this is something that you can you'll kind of do at home before we come into the meeting together, but a kind of, not exactly a meditation, but a visualization kind of exercise that's meant to try to prompt us to, to think long term, at least in like a 10-year time frame, and then sort of backfill a little bit of what we need to do now to make sure we're going in the right direction. And then we'll ask each of you to fill those out, and then we'll bring all those in for our retreat, which is we have scheduled for October 19th, I believe, Wednesday. 18th, yeah, I think that's right. Which I believe is actually the same day, yes, the 18th, as Sustainable Hanover that's doing a retreat. So,
Right, so Nancy's.
That's going to be tough, yeah. Though I love that some of our other boards and committees are also doing a sort of annual goal setting, and maybe that's something that we, think about expanding next year too. So that's sort of a new thing this year, or a totally new thing. We're going to have, and maybe Carrie in a little bit, if you want to give us some CIPC, I can do some of that too. Either way, we have some ARPA discussions. So those are all kind of new things that we're doing in the budget process this year. And the overall timeline that we talked about, just very overall, and then either for the next meeting a week from today or the meeting after that, I will have a very clear sort of week by week, like we did last year, where we'll have the timeline basically up until May. And so September is sort of the planning and logistics month. October is really goal setting and priorities. November is beginning some of the discussions more specifically about staffing and compensation costs, having more in-depth conversations with our collective bargaining units. That's also when department requests for operating and capital will start coming into Ellen and myself. That will be in November. December and January, we kind of have slotted as really doing the internal work on the budget after all the requests have come in. February is the sort of distribution and public engagement, work with some of the stakeholders like the finance committee. March is when we sort of finalize everything and get everything ready for town report and town meeting. So that's sort of the overall schedule. It's not totally dissimilar from last year. Office pool on whether things go smoother than it did last year. I think we're looking pretty good. But obviously there's still a lot that's kind of in flux. And so each meeting, for the next couple months, we should be prepared to start having more specific conversations about the budget. And October 23rd is one that's worth highlighting as well, because that is the meeting that is directly after our goal setting workshop. And so in that meeting on the 23rd is hopefully the one where we can sort of finalize that set of priorities. And then that's the conversation that will help frame how we then request all the budget materials from the department heads. So the 23rd, perhaps being the conversation about, tax rate targets, all that kind of stuff probably center around that October 23rd date. That's when we're going to want to lock in some ARPA priorities, because we'll need to, our goal is to commit all of that money by the end of this calendar year. And so I think I mentioned this before, but even though we have legally until the end of next calendar year to spend it, the guidance that we've gotten from NHMA has been that we should have it all committed by the end of this year, so that we don't lose any of the money next year in whatever political football unspent ARPA money may turn into with many elections next year. So the October 23rd is definitely a big date, and so I will in fact endeavor to make sure that we have a more concrete timeline before that meeting date. But just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that date. I don't think there's much else at this point other than the pieces around capital, but I'm certainly happy if there's any questions about anything. We're still pretty early in the process. But happy to answer any questions or speak further about anything else in the meantime.
I think that's great, Alex. You're changing it up a little bit, which it's time. And obviously last year was an aberration in just about everything. And hopefully we're not that we didn't get a good budget done. We did through the work, your hard work and the hard work of the whole staff. But hopefully it'll be a little smoother this time.
Hopefully.
And I think this format is intriguing and looking forward to it.
So there's finance committee, on the, that Carrie said it's our Friday mailing, it says finance committee, ? Has anybody stepped forward yet?
Wait a minute, we're not there yet.
Yeah, we haven't. Yeah, that's next discussion, Nancy.
Apologize.
No problem. No problem. We don't want to-
No, but I was like, wait a minute, did we miss something?
Yeah.
I'll throw out one more thing, non-capital budget related, which is that one of the things that Athos, we didn't spend a ton of time on, but we talked about a little bit, was the idea of basically, and maybe this is something we can come back to in the next meeting, but I'll throw it out in this one, which is how helpful or valuable to the board or your perception to the public was the way that we did the presentations in February of last year. My sense was that it was a tremendous amount of information and slides in a very short time frame. Even though there's obviously a lot to communicate, it was also there were a lot of different pieces in how we did that. And I know that we've done that sort of 3 nights or 4 nights of a couple hour meetings. But one of the things we're just brainstorming is, so yes, using the master plan as the input from a goals perspective is probably going to work out pretty well, I think. But perhaps the kind of fair idea style of meeting with the public about the budget, maybe that's something we want to think about doing in February on the presentation side. So that instead of, kind of being up here for 9 or 12 hours plus the couple dozen hours it takes to prepare all of the slides, maybe that time better spent, and I'm not sure if it is, but as something to think about and talk about, would that time be better spent in some other format? If we take X amount of hours of staff time to prepare, X amount of select board hours, and X amount of public hours, what's the best way to get the biggest bang for the buck as far as getting people in the community engaged on the most important aspects of the budget that we want?
Do you think we'll have time on the 18th to talk about that?
I bet we will. Yeah, we could do that. Yeah. I can make sure. I don't really have an agenda yet, but I can make sure that's on there.
Because that seems appropriate.
Yeah. Okay.
And that is something that is, we're always trying to tweak and work with.
And that was some of the feedback that I got last year when we just talked about the budget right after. It was a lot.
Yep.
And even though some of that was certainly my fault as far as adding more slides and information, it's still a lot of information to run through every department back to back like that. And so the idea of presenting it in a way where the members of the public especially can just sort of circulate around and ask questions and have like more engaging conversations, it wouldn't be that much different. It may even be less time from a staff standpoint if we do that all in one afternoon versus or it's at least close as far as the amount of staff time. So just something to throw out there.
Yeah, I think our goal is to get more people involved and engaged. I think that, and if we can come up with a way to do that, I think one of the things that I've learned since being on the select board is that so much of our budget is salary and benefit related, and like one of the biggest things that I've learned is that 75 to 80% of the budget that we have to work with is staff.
Right.
And so the other stuff, relative to roughly the $30 million budget, there's not a lot of wiggles, in terms of it. And so I think that's a really helpful thing to communicate to people that, okay, we've got this awesome staff, and then we have all these other things that we want to do, and it's all kind of relative in terms of how we can really affect change and how we can be responsive. And so I think, if we can share that with people and then, have them, speak to us and share their ideas on how you might use that, how we might spend our dollars, and that 25%. And of that 25%, there's a lot of things that, we're fixing, like roads
Utility
and
bills,
utilities.
right.
And so there's a lot of, I think it's really important, as a primer, these are the things that we're kind of committed to spending dollars on. And the discretionary money is, we could choose not to have staff, but I don't think any of us would want to do that. And we might choose to close down buildings, again, not things we want to do. And so I think that having that as kind of budgeting 101, like, hey guys, this is how it breaks down, would be a really helpful way to communicate, for me, that was incredibly powerful. And then we can talk about the other stuff.
I love the idea of the budget 101, because I think that can engage people.
Yeah.
I'm a little reluctant to let go of a common forum to go through departmental reviews, because I think the back and forth of the questions is good for everyone to hear. So if someone asks a really good pertinent question as a sidebar and no one else gets it, a lot is lost. So, and I think it's already a lot for us to get through each of the department reviews in the format we have. So anyway, I think we're just going to be thoughtful about not losing some of the value and also making sure we can get through it.
Maybe there's a way to do both somehow that isn't a tremendous amount of time.
But I would also say, to echo what you're saying, Carrie, it is the one time a year that the fire department comes in, the police department comes in, and you hear.
Yeah, there's a lot of value to that.
It's like the annual report, but it's an oral
There's a lot
report
of value to that.
that
Right.
you hear, and there's this, and people who are really interested, in our emergency services come or watch on CATV or YouTube that particular night. So, but I'm open to, if there are ways to get more people involved and share more information, I'm certainly open to ideas of doing that.
I just don't want to lose any of the detail. Detail is very helpful for me to understand the full budget and the people. You comment about how many dollars we spend in personnel. I would like to see the faces, and it also is our way of acknowledging the, publicly while the cameras are rolling, Peter Kawaki's role, and the fire chief's role, the fire fighters' roles, and and we have half a dozen of our firefighting team here. I think it's quite powerful, and as long as we have CATV rolling for us, I think it's pretty huge recognition.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other, and it's a lot of fun too. Seeing everyone. Not sitting here for hours and hours is fun, but meeting people is fun. And the other thing, which I'm not quite sure, this is all work in progress, Alex. You're trying to figure this out, and I appreciate that, and I admire what you're trying to do. The other thing is, the give and take. Joanna was talking about, we're going to set our goals, and then we're going to try and figure out, if we want to do this. Sometimes we're going to have to do less of other things. So where does the give and take come from? I'm not sure how that'll fit in, but that's another topic for discussion.
Yeah, I'll do a little more brainstorming, because I hear definitely, and definitely don't disagree, but definitely hear also some of the values that come out of what happens when we're all in the same room. I also know that I don't think there was a ton of public engagement in the presentations, and even from the minor metrics from our website, as far as we posted every video separately also and everything, and just wasn't a lot of people listening or watching.
People weren't watching.
Now we don't know what's happening literally if someone's watching on TV. There's no data for that, but it wasn't a ton. And just trying to think, but it was a lot of. But so yeah, maybe there's some mix of things, and because I would also something you were saying before, Joanne. I mean, we have we're basically rewriting all of our compensation, our pay matrix, that's all happening in the next couple months.
Yeah.
That's going to be, there's going to be a lot to work on and explain to our staff, but to explain publicly as well is going to be big. And I don't know how we do that in a meeting like this. That would be, I don't know. I might sit through a presentation like that, but that's I'm not sure everybody would love to do that. And so thinking about ways we do have some in that, plus some of the housing, zoning, future kind of building the budget from a rateable perspective. There's a few key conversation topics that are hard to do in a presentation format. And maybe there's ways to break off a few topics and do something separately. So if people want to know more, they can engage in a more interactive, but maybe, I don't know, just try to think about ways to get the best of both worlds. But we have some time there. I just wanted to throw that out there.
No, I'm glad we're discussing it this early. It's, normally we wouldn't have brought this item for discussion for several months.
So send me any ideas, I guess, in the meantime. Athos, I'm sure we'll talk more.
Yeah.
And I added it to a list to make sure we spend a little bit of time on the 18th too.
Great, please. Shall we move on to 6B, which is Capital Improvement Plan Committee appointments / discussion. So just as just for those people who are watching from home, what is the Capital Improvement Plan Committee? Anybody want to just describe that in 2 seconds? It's basically
it's a new mechanism for us.
Somebody just give us a one sentence.
Sure. So it's basically a bridge between the planning process and the budget process. So it ties into the goals of the master plan, and it informs voters in making appropriations and policy choices. It's actually a prerequisite to a number of things that we might be interested in, such as impact fee ordinances, growth management ordinances. It is required. It requires a master plan, which we're in the midst of revising. It's been authorized by a town meeting, and it includes planning board participation.
Great,
So those are
thank you,
key
Karen.
highlights.
It's technically the program committee, not plan committee.
I'm sorry, what did I say
We
wrong?
should, we have it wrong.
Yeah, I think I've
Jenny,
labeled
what
it
is the
both.
correct terminology?
Program instead of plan.
Say, what's the full name?
Oh, sorry, Capital Improvement Program Committee.
Okay, thank you.
And the only thing I'd add is it's an advisory committee to the select board, and if we have one, a budget committee.
Which we don't.
Right.
Great. So this is on the agenda item. Alex and Ellen, Carrie, and Jenny met to discuss this, to get our goals going forward. Somebody want to bring us up to date on that?
Yeah, so we met on August 28th, and one of the topics was to finalize the committee membership. We've actually previously had a conversation about the Finance Committee member, John Dolan, who was Budget Director under Governor Lynch. So he's the Finance Committee nominee.
I'm sorry, who was that? I'm just missing.
John Dolan, D-O-L-A-N.
It's a very familiar name.
In that meeting, we talked about planning board representation. Jenny recommended Brian Edwards, and he has gotten back to us, and he's willing to serve, which is terrific.
And I just point out, his name is spelled here.
His name is spelled wrong,
Yes,
yes.
it's spelled incorrectly. And Kim Hartman has 2 N's.
Yep.
So we've just messed up everybody's name on this.
Yes.
Well,
Did we get anybody's name right?
You got Carrie's name right,
Yeah.
and Jenny,
And yours.
and Alex.
Well,
That's
yeah.
awesome.
I gotta take care of myself first.
So shown here, although I'll read out this, but Alex, Ellen, Jenny, myself, Peter Kobacki, John Dolan, Kim Hartman from the Hanover School Board, Brian Edwards, who chairs the planning board, and Nico Macri, who is a Dartmouth student who has expressed interest and has previously done some work with the town.
And we talked about having an organization meeting soon, this month, to get everybody together, do some introductions, talk about the scope of the committee, look at a timeline, maybe some meeting dates, schedules, things of that nature. And then I think also start to review some historical documentation as well.
Yes.
And that, because we won't be putting out requests for capital for another 6 weeks to department heads. So the idea was we could use that time to get a little bit of kind of pre-work done.
Right.
And also make sure we are requesting that if there's information, so we get the CIPC together, and if there are things that people want to make sure that we ask departments for when we're requesting things, that we should know that as soon as possible so that we can ask them and get that to the committee in a couple months.
So there's a fair amount of formative work that the committee should get going on.
And that this is another example of something I think that's just worth probably stating at each time we talk about it, that this is our first time, at least in any recent history, having this. There's probably going to be changes, things that don't work as well, things that do work as well, and that we're adjusting as we go a little bit. And I'm sure we'll do some sort of review of the process afterwards and tweak things for next year.
Well, thank you. Go ahead.
In terms of the capital planning programming work that you're doing, is there a time horizon that you're looking at? Is it 6 years? Is it 10 years?
It has to be 6 to 10 years.
And it's closely linked to the planning work that we're doing, the master planning work, right?
Yep.
And so for me as a planner, the fact that there's no planning staff on the committee, I'm assuming that you'll pull in staff people as you need them.
Yeah, and the thought there was that because the planning staff has been so involved in the master plan already, and that those are the goals that are sort of feeding into the select board, that there's planning involvement, even though there isn't a planner on the committee. And there is a planning board representative, which is really the person who should be representing that kind of viewpoint, yeah. But we thought with this, it's hard to take anybody out and adding, and I probably would not want to burden Rob with another committee meeting at this point.
But he's probably the only one that's ever written a CIP.
I've written them in other towns,
Okay.
though the New Hampshire style is a little different. But I think we'll be able to do that. There's definitely a formula to it, and there's some examples that are out there, like towns, and I've talked to other town managers, we've compared, because I sent what we were working on to a few other towns before so we're all,
Great.
yeah.
Great.
So we should be in good shape, and I will definitely loop Rob in on it, so he's not fully out of the, whatever.
Yeah, I think that's an important,
Right.
Looping them.
I mean, I think it's an important point because it's common to wrap the planning element of capital improvement plans in with the budget for the capital improvement plan. That's like how Portsmouth very explicitly does it, and some other towns very explicitly do that. With the acknowledgement that it takes, good things happen when you also plan them, and that takes a bit of attention and time and money. Sometimes a grant like this housing opportunities grant or whatever it is.
Oh, great. So do you need a motion or something?
I don't think so. I think we.
Yeah, we actually have to
Oh, we have to
appoint
vote on
people.
these people?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
right.
and we
We
should
need a
add,
motion.
we should make sure John Dolan is on that
We
list.
should fix, it's Nicholas Macri with the accent of.
Can I
Of
address one thing? I think we should just have a public at large as opposed to a Dartmouth student.
Yeah.
Let's just have him fit in as a public at large as opposed to a Dartmouth student representative.
Right.
So if you folks are not opposed, I'd like to strike the last part of it.
I'm fine with that.
Yep.
He's a resident and
Yep.
he's keen, and I think it's great.
Do we spell his name wrong too?
Yes.
We spelled everybody's name wrong except your.
Yeah.
Except
I think
mine,
so.
no, I'm the only one.
Yeah, I think
And I've got a version that's got some corrections on it.
Okay.
And, but I will make sure that the final version is all correct.
Okay.
Because I think we missed
I think
kids.
we have the phonetics of it.
And John has got an H or no H?
It has an H.
Okay.
Yes.
Just thinking of future possible mistakes.
Okay, so we need a motion to appoint these wonderful folks, including yourselves. But that's okay, you can appoint yourself.
Well, Carrie and I were already appointed.
That's right.
So
you
we
were.
don't need.
So
to
we
be
need a
appointed.
motion to appoint
Right.
Alex, Ellen, Pete,
John.
John, Kim, Brian, and Nico. I'll move that we appoint these wonderful folks to the Capital Improvement Program Committee.
So second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you very much. This will be an interesting process, hopefully. Move forward. So I understand that the next item agenda we've already covered with the public hearing. That was the traffic safety updates.
Yeah, the only other thing I was going to say is that we have another staff meeting shortly, and so I'll have another quarterly update, probably not by next week, but the October.
Yeah, I think
meeting.
these are very helpful, and I'd like to keep them coming. That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah, we're gonna, yeah.
All right, so then we move on to business requiring action. Looking at the August 21st, 2023 minutes, I looked at them. Please.
And on page 3.
Wait, no, excuse me one second. So this is not part of the consent. Okay, we stopped doing this part of the consent because we always have something to say about it. Okay. Sorry, Nancy, I didn't.
A
Sorry.
specific comment and then a general comment. The specific comment is on page 3. The citizen's name is Rich Menge, M-E-N-G-E. He also appeared before us tonight, but I'm just spelling his name for Steve. And then a general comment about the minutes. People's, the way we address people, that I'd like people to be able to choose titles if they'd like. I'm just commenting on the fact that Mr. Torpe is always referred to as Mr. Torpe, and Jenny's referred to as Chamberlain, and Joanne is referred to as Whitcomb. If we care to put MS or MR or DR in front of our names, we ought to tell Carrie, because I think that the esteemed town manager should not be the only one who's called Mr.
I'd vote for the only one not to be, but.
I'm sure that just escaped your attention when you were reading it.
I did not notice
It
that.
sure stuck out for me.
Yeah,
It should be
I thought about that
consistent.
as well, and I really wasn't sure what to think, frankly. I didn't know which way to
Never
come
noticed
down. I appreciate your, yeah.
It's kind of like middle school, Russ. It's
Well, there are a lot of people at the hospital who don't know which is my first name, which is my last name, so they call me Dr. Athos all the time. Or maybe that's just a term of endearment.
Oh, yeah.
That's a term.
Or a term of
Yeah.
whatever. That's what I like to think of it. Anyway, Nancy, that's a great suggestion.
Thank you.
So
How are we going to solve it?
what is it? Are we just going with last names? Are we doing a first initial last name? I mean, if we're speaking to like the people in the audience, they say their full name.
Yeah, they get full names.
And
I
it
see.
may
Fine,
be
but-
just cumbersome for Carrie or whomever is typing minutes to constantly go Nancy Carter and so forth. But,
Should
as I
just be
say,
consistent.
I
It's
don't
Jessica.
want you to be
Yeah.
just called Whitcomb.
Maybe
I don't care, but
first letter, last name?
As long as you're willing to have your first letter and your last name.
Yeah.
I would like us all to have
Yeah.
the
I mean, I'm
identical.
my own personal, and this, I'm not a voting member, but just my own personal thing is, the titles that imply gender or marital status, I'm not a
Yeah.
huge fan personally of those. I don't mind to be informal with people, but also to me, some of those, like the Mr. and Miss and Mrs. are just, I don't know.
This might be a little too
But,
informal.
but maybe
as well.
that's, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, let's, whatever you all are
I like the
comfortable
8th
with.
grade analogy.
I mean, I'm okay with it.
I mean, we can also do our title, you know, we can do select board member, last name.
That's what we used to do.
Okay.
That's what we used to do.
could do
It's
that.
cumbersome, but maybe this.
Yeah, but that should be like a copy and paste or a hotkey or something.
A
That should
hotkey.
be, that should be an easy way to, I think whatever you all
I
want.
think we're adding.
complications still.
Okay, fine. First letter, last name. First initial, last name. What do you think about that?
Can we just call him Torpy?
No.
Only nicknames.
Yes, so we are all called A. Torpy and M. Carter and
Okay,
J.
yeah.
Whitcomb.
Okay.
Is that agreeable to Jenny, everybody?
And we could make that for just everybody, and just a general, anytime a name is mentioned.
I think For the public,
You wanna do
For
full
the
names?
public, I'd like their full name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
in case, yeah, because I'm not the best with names, and I may need to, I mean, I remember our names.
So so the instruction would be any.
Nice work, Alphys.
Any town official, elected official, staff person, volunteer,
We can track them down, yeah.
name, first, initial and last name.
Yep.
So,
Well,
Sounds good.
and then anybody, any external person, full name.
Well, I mean, I think if a police officer speaks, it's nice to know that Hanover PD, Jay Whitcomb is speaking.
Right. I mean, put their, position.
Affiliation. Well, I mean, like having Rob here or having,
So maybe the first time a person is mentioned,
And
the
then,
position,
yeah.
and then the time after that, it's
Yeah, just
initial
say-
and last name.
complicating things.
Let's give it a
And
shot.
on every odd page.
We'll give it a shot.
Thank
I
you.
like the nickname
Thank you all
idea.
for indulging.
Do we get to choose our own nicknames though?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so wait, we're still
Okay,
talking,
guys, let's
Nancy,
get
you
to
were still talking
business
about it.
here.
Yes, I finished my comments.
Nancy's comments are done. Does anyone else have any other comments on the minutes?
Nope.
Of December, August 21st, great. So I move that we accept the minutes as amended. I hope somebody has the amendments.
Carrie can always go.
Yes.
Great.
Switch.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great, it passes. So now we are moving on to the next agenda item, which is the consent. So, we have appointments to the Building Code Advisory Committee and Acting Emergency Management Director. We have donations to Hanover Parks and Rec, which I will read out. And then an authorization to allow the town manager to execute federal fund aid program project agreement for the crosstown multi-use path connecting Reservoir Road to Wheelock Street and Joanna's house.
May I request pulling out of the consent agenda the appointment of acting fire chief Michael Gilbert and mention him.
Absolutely. I was going to try and do that anyway, but let's pull it out since you asked. So we are down to the donations to the Hanover Parks and Rec, and let me.
Well, no,
what?
you have appointments of the Building Code Advisory.
Oh yeah, sorry, that too. Which is where I'm losing it.
We can, okay, so I can take a crack at a motion if you'd like.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, so move to approve the consent agenda, items 2 and 3 as presented.
Excellent. Is there a second?
So second.
The only thing we need to do for item 2, though, is acknowledge who the wonderful people are, and that's what I'm looking for frantically,
And we can
but I
do
can't
that
find it.
after.
Afterwards?
Okay, fine, we'll do that after. Thank you, Carrie, I like that plan. So, is there a second? We had a second, correct?
Yes.
Nancy seconded.
Let's call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great, so now we're back to the non-consent item of the Building Code Advisory Committee and the Acting Emergency Management Director.
So what if I give you a motion to appoint the Building Code Advisory Committee members to be Sloan Mayer, Jack Wilson, and Randy Mudge, as they've requested reappointment and for terms of 3 years?
Is there a second? Second. And other than discussion being, we're very much appreciative of these efforts of these volunteers, fine volunteers. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Nobody? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much to these wonderful volunteers. And then, Joanna, another?
I would like to move that we appoint as an acting emergency management director, our acting fire chief, Michael Gilbert.
Yay, I'll second that.
As well as the addition of the Homeland Security obligations. Is there, it says an information updated with Homeland Security. That means that there are.
No, it just means that he needs to do that.
Yeah, we're updating, yeah.
That's his new job. Thank you. Way to go.
Okay.
Now get to work.
Great.
I believe, I can't remember, we have a second. We have a motion and a second. And any further discussion?
Yes, I'd just like to publicly acknowledge that Michael is basically one person doing two jobs, and he is doing so in a short timeline, and that we are all appreciative of his efforts.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'd like to call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
A resounding unanimous vote. Thank you. And that moves, let me just, final check it right where I am. So we did that. Oh, we have to call out the donations. Thank you. Yes, this is wonderful. This is donations to the Hanover Parks and Recreation, for which we are greatly appreciative. And these are following donations in support of the youth athletic teams: Snacks Bar in the sum of $650, Dunk's Sports Grill in the sum of $650, Co-op Food Stores $650. I suppose that's Make Architects $450, B Mobile $250, and Mascoma Bank $650. Thank you very much for all these generous donations, everybody. They make a big difference. Okay. So now we're on to reports and communications. Town manager report. Alex.
I got nothing. I'm gonna save it all for.
Did you want to say a word or two, or you just wanted to? Okay. Okay. Thank you for your service. Thanks.
I'll do my report. I'm going to try and get back into the once-a-month schedule now that we're on twice-a-month meetings. So I will do my report next week.
Okay, fine. Thank you, Alex. Select board and committee reports. Joanna.
Yes, the trustees of trust funds met last week, I think, and we discussed how the trust funds are doing, which surprisingly are in good shape. We also spent a fair amount of time discussing the Brissette funds and reviewing guidelines, and I committed to take a crack at an application form for folks.
That's really important, Joanna. Thank you for doing that.
So, and there's still a bunch of work that needs to be done. So we're gonna meet, Ellen has given me some background materials that, have accumulated over time since the Brissettes very graciously set up the trust fund for the town. We're meeting at the end of the month, so I have a little homework to do before then. And the idea is that I would draft it, maybe I'll have something for us that I can share with you all, and you can just give me some edits.
Okay.
And then take it to the trustees of trust funds and have them review it, but trying to be much more consistent and clear in terms of, how we review how we review requests for those monies, and then how we track it and make sure we're meeting the letter of the intent of the trust. So that was the only committee meeting that I attended.
Okay.
The Hanover Finance Committee met on August 31st. A couple of things were queried. A number of years ago, when Betsy was working here, she used to do in October a 5-year financial outlook, kind of a quasi 5-year budget outlook, and so that was commented on as having been helpful at the time. Don't know if that's something that Alex is resurrectable, but it was a feature of the budget process for many years.
I was wondering where that was going to fit into, especially with the new how that, so what we're talking about is, Betsy would give us a interpretation of what the budget was gonna look like, and actually 10 years, which I think she was going out to. Of course, it was getting fuzzy at 10 years, but regardless. And that involved a lot of the then CIP work in particular, as well as inflation and how that was affecting it. With this new capital improvement program committee, asked to look at 6 years. That's part of the puzzle. The other part being, of course, salaries and benefits. So somehow it would be nice. That's another thing we need to figure out, how we can project out not just the capital improvement part, but the whole budget as a whole, which I found incredibly useful for looking at out years.
Our intention would be to present as much detail as possible about 6 years out total, including capital, including operating, and including expenses and revenue. Because the revenue piece, that's something that we started to touch on last year a little bit, as far as if we know, we looked at, I think it was at 2% inflation over 5 years or 6 years, so that's $3 million. And where's that coming from? And that if we even did a 5% tax, it doesn't even get you close to $3 million. And so thinking about the expense side and the revenue side, the more that we can dig into that this budget year, the better.
Thank you.
So, does that answer your question? So are we gonna get a 5-year?
I think we're going to aim for the 6 years capital, because we're going to do 6 years for capital anyway, and so just use that as kind of the same milestone to do everything else.
So operating for 6 years and
And
capital.
expenses and revenue.
But the capital, you won't see that in the month of October. You won't see that probably till January.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Realistically, so.
That's when I would imagine all of this would be for. Is there a different timing?
October.
We're saying at the
October,
beginning?
it used to be October, yeah.
Yeah, I am not sure how valuable, because what I would argue, so if we're passing a budget, we would want to look in more detail at future years, but we wouldn't even know how to project out the future years until we had the budget conversation. We could put like a blanket, 5%, or, we could put a percent to something and just, which is, I think, more closely what those prior projections weren't of budgeting. They were just sort of a formula forecasting.
That's what it was, revenue and expenses.
Okay.
Formulaically done.
Yeah, if there's something we want to do for the 23rd meeting, the October 23rd meeting, I am definitely open to trying to get whatever we want for that time period. But projecting out 6 years, I think from my perspective, we want to do in February when we present the whole budget.
Yeah.
And then present basically, here's this year and then 5 additional years. And if that's not going to be just a number thrown, we're going to actually look at, we're going to try and get some detail there. So I guess a question would be, at the beginning of the budget process, is there some bit of information that you'd like that would be helpful for the budget process?
So, I shared this with you, there's a sort of quick and dirty way to do this, and I think I sent you a spreadsheet and a document, and something like that could be a helpful mechanism for us to discuss setting a tax guideline, which I think has traditionally been done out of the budget.
That's exactly right. And the one utility, granted it was imperfect information, of that projection was, there were years where we were looking at a very small increase I'm just making examples, 2 years down the road, and then a very large increase thereafter due to vagaries mostly in the capital part of the budget. So but I'm just trying to think of how helpful.
What do you want?
Well, so the 1 year quick model approach that I think I shared with you and Ellen is, I think, is something, and with the forbearance of the select board, I'd be willing to work with you a little bit in terms of teeing up as something to then present to the select board.
If you think it's helpful and not onerous, sure.
Let me take a look at that with Ellen. I haven't had a chance to look at what you sent over yet in detail, but let me see, because we're both pretty at capacity. But if there's something we can do that's not too time consuming, that helps give a little bit of information early on. Yeah.
It's pretty rough cut. I mean,
Okay.
It's exactly what you were saying before about, certain things, salary,
Right.
user percentage, healthcare insurance, you have a quote from the things that you kind of can forecast, and capital items that are
Right.
either cliffing or rising.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't want to detract too much from your day job.
Right. It's a lot of other budget. Yeah, but let me go over that with Ellen. I think that we can, because I think this is just setting this up kind of formula based, and then throwing that against the budget and coming out with those numbers. Yeah.
Anything else, Carrie, from the finance?
No, that's, and one other item was just the parking deficit and potentially adjusting the TIF. So I guess 7 Allen Street is associated with the TIF district. And
7 Allen or 7 Lebanon?
7 Lebanon, thank you. And it currently is capped at around $85,000. So to the extent that the parking deficit, if it became an issue, that's a mechanism by which some additional funds could go into the parking fund. But hopefully the parking fund is curing itself and that deficit will go away. But that's a question, because I'm not sure we yet know the fund balance for the parking fund.
I don't think we do. I did talk about this with Ellen a little bit, and I think where we landed, but I don't want to too confidently speak for her, but I'm pretty sure where we landed on this was that we don't think we need to do something like that this year.
Okay.
Because I think the parking fund is not as bad as it seemed, especially with that, whatever, that 500,000 or whatever it was that isn't part of that deficit. And then when you look at the operations, especially if you take the advanced transit piece, which I think there's one of the bullet points for discussing in the budget this year. We have a few things that we kind of queued up or pushed off, whichever way we want to look at it, from last year. One was like the fire and ambulance funds and potentially merging them into the general fund. That was an example of kind of a topic that we all kind of said we can't really do this year. And another one was, how should the advanced transit funding be allocated? Because right now it's basically 100% paid for. Our community pays for public transit through people who come here to park. And now granted, there's a lot of value in basically asking people who are driving to pay specifically to help offset the negative effects of their driving, so that they're paying for buses, but also I could see an argument to be made that the taxpayers at large might want to support public transit too. And so, basically that amount in the parking fund and the 50,000 additional that we put in last year that did enable advanced transit to launch new schedules that start today, which is 2 hours later during the week and Saturday service and more frequent stops between Hanover and West Leb. Which is great. And I think we're just going to hopefully keep going in that direction. That even if we took that 50,000 out that we put in last year, it makes the parking fund look pretty different without that additional burden on it. So basically the short of that is that Ellen and I both seem to think we're probably okay this year, but not 100% sure yet.
Sorry, what's the 500? I missed what you were talking about.
Oh, that was an amount of money when we, so I'm gonna not remember some of it exactly right, but basically when we were not auditing, because I shouldn't use that word, but in deep detail reviewing many of our accounts last year ourselves, one of the things that we found was that it appeared that the parking fund had a negative $800,000 something deficit, but 500,000 of that negative 800,000 was basically, I think it was part of reserved was the terminology, but we had no documentation for what that was reserved for, but our auditors told us that you can't use reserve funds for non-reserved uses, but we could not find anything to support the funds being reserved, and so basically they got, I'll say it this way, they were basically locked up and could not be used for anything. and then it turned out that they weren't. So the negative 800,000 deficit became closer to a negative 300,000 deficit.
About the parking, because last time you reported that there were going to be some changes, and I saw that they went in, but typically the select board votes on changes of hours and based on past meetings and the RSA, and we also vote on the rates and fees. And in addition to being interested in the revenue, say that the parking town, the 7-Lab brings in, and the park mobile data and how things are being used. I'm just really concerned about our lunch crowd and that, stop a half block off Main Street. Our highest parking demand historically, maybe it's changed, has been during lunch. And by using up 3-hour parking and switching it to 10-hour parking, I think it's a discussion.
But
I'd like to see the data, and I was surprised to see it happen because I thought it was going to happen in October, and I'm also surprised just because typically it's voted on.
So we did vote on the rates and fees. We did discuss.
We rated, but then they went down to 0 on Saturdays, which we didn't vote on.
Right, and so
Which
the
is
only
a
change that we
change.
made, which we discussed in the last meeting, was to make the parking garage free on Saturdays. And then I
Yeah,
think
that
there was
was-
some data that you were interested in that I have not had a chance to meet with parking yet. We have a meeting next week. And so there's a whole bunch of other things that we're talking about that I think, over the next 3 to 6 months, we'll have some conversations about parking stuff here.
Right, I just like the parking ordinance, our parking ordinance, ordinance number 6, we usually vote to update it for RSA 4717 in the select board meeting when we change where a parking spot is or how long that parking spot is for. And so there's a history of how it's been updated throughout the years and throughout various meetings, and instead of doing that, or instead of voting on the rate to change it, it just happened.
Well, it didn't just happen. I brought it up in the last meeting. We all discussed it and agreed to it. So that was the last report.
It was part of a town report. It wasn't on the agenda, and we didn't vote on it. And so I'm just maybe I'm not understanding the process. It just seems like something that we should be involved in terms of making the decision as to how that happens. And I know there was interest, at least on my part, and I thought on Joanna's part, on seeing what this utilization data was. And I do have, and I also just, what problem are we solving? If the problem that we're solving is that 20 people feed their meters and we know who they are, do we know why they're doing that? If the problem that we're solving is that we don't have enough parking during lunch, then I don't think we should have a 10-hour lot instead of a 3-hour lot. I don't know what easier means, right? Because we have a limited amount of space. Some of it is very close to downtown businesses, retail, lunches, and some of it is a little bit further away. And then some of it is a little bit further still. So
did these parking lots get changed?
yeah,
Because my understanding it was just going to be the BVAC,
They
because
both-
that's always empty.
they both changed.
Why did that one change?
I'm not sure which ones we're pointing to.
63 South Main, the deck. Yeah.
The deck.
That I'm not sure.
Well,
Maybe
there's a sign out there that says it's 10 hours, and it wasn't there before.
I mean, we had raised the issue that the parking lot to the east of the Black Family
That one's
Arts
also
Center,
10 hours.
it was only 2, and that was changed about 18 to 24 months ago before Alex was here. And for the past, well, actually, it may have even been before that, but for the past 4 years, it's been empty, or 3 years. And we discussed this and said, hey, instead of having an empty parking lot with 2-hour parking, why not make it 10-hour, which is what it was.
Right.
And so that was the one that was discussed in terms of changing. And I thought that was one that we actually voted on during the rate.
We certainly discussed it, I'm not sure if we voted.
Voted on it.
I wasn't aware of the deck having changed.
Well,
Yeah.
that's what I haven't,
It's right out there.
I had heard that they
Well,
were doing
one-
that and we were like, why?
Maybe we should take,
Well, maybe
I'm not
we
sure.
should update it correctly. So maybe we should schedule a public hearing next week, since we're meeting next week, to take a proper vote, so
I
it's
don't
on
think
the
we can do it
record.
next week, but I think it's too short. But,
We have to notice it.
I know, I don't know what the notice
yeah, I think
requirement
it's
is for.
7 days.
we need a public hearing for that? Is that what you're
I
saying?
thought.
I mean,
thought it was
if
public
there's a
vote.
process question, I can certainly look into the process and make sure that we do it in a way that's consistent with whatever we're supposed to be doing, whether it's a public hearing or not a public hearing, or a vote or not a vote.
Yeah.
So
I'm not sure it's a public hearing, I think it might even just be a.
It says you have to
select board-
notice it. Is noticing a public hearing?
if you're doing. a
In the
public hearing-
past, we've had a public hearing. I don't know what's required. Like, if you look at, when we
Okay.
decided to have 4 free Saturdays, that was a public hearing. When we
It's true,
shifted
at
other,
Christmas,
yeah,
We
last
always do
year, that was for,
the holiday time.
the,
Well, just one second though, the word public hearing means we have to schedule that and notice that, as opposed to just an agenda item.
correct.
So,
They're different things. So rates and fees are different, I think, than switching the hours.
okay,
So I think we had a public hearing last year during the holidays in 2022 to
yeah,
have 4 free Saturdays because it's a change in the fee, which means that we'll have a revenue loss, which typically we would have an understanding of approximately what we anticipate that revenue loss to be. Because we've already approved rates and fees that are supposed to bring in a certain amount of revenue to cover the cost of running the parking garage.
okay, so what are we proposing?
And then the other one I don't think needs,
Let's propose to make it right.
Yes, so we're in committee reports, but it sounds like we have an agenda item.
Right, we should have an agenda item for next week.
Yeah.
Adjusting all of this.
Yeah, I mean, if we can, but let me go back and look at it, and I can come back with,
The recommendation
Yeah.
next week, so we may, if
so at least
it,
we know.
yeah, and so we can schedule a public hearing to make it correct, or if it can just be an agenda item. But we should
For the
understand
hours?
the process and clarify the changes that have been made without the due process.
I mean, what's our next meeting after that? I mean,
so the,
October 9th, I think.
so it's the Board of Selectmen may, after providing notice to the general public, by resolution, establish or modify the location of areas designated in Appendix A or B
Yeah, I'll look into
Yeah,
it.
So
We
it
can-
could probably just be done on
Notice.
the agenda,
yeah,
for the hours.
for the hours.
The rates and fees are voted on,
Public hearing.
public hearing.
Alex, we can do that on the 9th, if
And then-
next week is busy.
Yeah, sorry, are we doing, I thought we had a third Roman numeral on the agenda about the crosstown multi-use path and making sure we can
That was in the
authorize.
consent.
That moved to this consent?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to
We
make sure.
approved that, Jenny.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I was just like,
Okay,
I read through that
let's
otherwise.
get back
the
to
committee
where
report.
we are, which is,
Sorry, we didn't do
Select
other
board.
business though, so that was my other
Committee
business.
reports.
I didn't see other.
we're in committee reports.
Yeah, we are in committee reports.
Right.
Yeah, and so I think,
Nothing
I
further.
don't see other business here.
yeah, so I know, I didn't either, so I
We
just
should
brought up
remember to put that
parking
on.
because
Yeah,
Terry
okay.
brought up parking, so I went out of order.
Okay,
We're back to.
yes, you are
you.
out of order,
Sorry.
Jenny.
We're back to you, Athos.
Okay, well, I had a really fun select board report, which is that the Trescott Committee, which is the land company that owns with Dartmouth 50%, 50/50 with Dartmouth, the Trescott lands, which surround but do not include the Hanover Waterworks Company. No, excuse me, that's what it used to be called, the municipal water supply, as we took a site visit up there. And it's I happen to go up there a lot. It's very close to where I live, and it's quite a resource. If people in town have not enjoyed its resources, then you should avail yourself of them. It's great for hiking. What is allowed is hiking, mountain biking, skiing, when there's snow. Snowshoeing, when there's snow. And hunting. And a lot of people do all of those. I'm trying to think, yeah, that's about it. Nancy, select board report.
Yes. On September 5th, your planning board met and we had a minor lot line adjustment and a major presentation by Dartmouth College about a renovation that they are planning for the Fairweathers, which are the pair of brick buildings immediately behind Dartmouth Hall. And so it's going to be a major undertaking. They intend to begin, this was just the first presentation, very, very informal. They intend to begin summer of 24, and it will last for 2 years. And it's really important that people have this on their radar because they are right in the middle of town, including, cement trucks and rebar trucks and all of those kinds of things. It's going to be a major undertaking, and right in the center of town. There will be several other opportunities for people to see these presentations in person in the planning board between now and summertime. I really enjoyed the presentation. The only thing I asked of the planners, and of course everything is already down on paper, so I don't know if I'm just blowing in the wind, is the inclusion of more beds. We've all talked about how important it is for more students to be housed on campus. They're doing this major renovation going from 228 beds to 260, which means only 32 beds, a lot of dollars and effort and so forth. It is going to be a first-year student residence halls, which is really important because you couldn't be any closer to lecture halls and the social centers of Dartmouth than the Fairweathers. So it's a big undertaking and big improvements for our town, as I say, whether or not anybody cares or heeds my comments about including more beds. Who knows?
How many can they go up to? Like 50 something?
I have
More?
no idea. They didn't say. Now.
I mean, there's a space limitation, I'm sure.
They're closing down a pair of buildings that have 228 beds, and they are planning on 260 beds. As I say, I just made my consistent and passionate plea to please include more beds.
I was going to say, Fairweather came up in Hanover Bike Walk because we were happy to see more beds, like in this walkable vicinity. We were really excited about the lawn, like having a beautiful lawn and embracing that living part of the living learning communities. And we were excited to hear that there's plans for covered bike parking. They're not in the drawings right now. We are also super excited to hear that the town staff is thinking about the gateway from West Wheelock, the Mid-Wheelock district, and really thinking about coming up with a comprehensive walk-bike plan and announcing, to everyone as they're coming into town that you have arrived at a town and this is where people are. So making that feel very villagey, and the possibility, and I think they're meeting about this tomorrow, of maybe asking NHDOT to leave that crossing that they put up across West Wheelock by Old Tuck Drive, and which would really help people get to the boathouse and the river and all kinds of river fun and gateway fun. And
it also help when they shut down the south side of the bridge in the winter.
Yes.
Just for people to
safely
cross.
So we all agree, ideally, they would also just follow both sides, but particularly if that side is closed, we do need access to the facilities. and make sure people on both sides of the bridge have access. We had a great bike valet parking at the Allen Street, which we talked about, and we're talking about partnering with Parks and Rec. More going forward, Liz Burdette suggested they just stock lawn chairs so that there's an event and we have bike parking. People who come on their bike could get a lawn chair and not like suffer for lack of storage capacity to, you know, go hear music on the green or whatever. And then this Sunday, we are having a play street, the Occam Pond Walk and Roll. Everyone is invited. You can come do little obstacle courses. It's like 12 till 2. And that's just like an opportunity to, you know, have another community formation type of plan and use our streets in a playful, fun way. Get people out walking and biking. Tell your kids, there'll be chalk. Bill Young will wave hello to you, probably talk to you. It's going to be great. That's that.
Great.
Thank you very much, Jen.
I have one announcement, sorry. There was another meeting that we had since August 21st. The Hanover Sustainability Master Planning Group met on August 22nd, reviewed our downtown vibrancy chapter and also talked about our future land use map. There is another meeting tomorrow at 5 p.m. in this room, reviewing the housing chapter and continuing conversations on the future land use map. So, but getting close, we also spent a fair amount of time talking about community engagement this fall and community outreach and how to get people to go to the website and read the stuff and give the staff and committee members feedback so we can tie this baby up this fall. So lots of work, good work going on.
Thank you, Joanna. All right. There's been a request for a non-public session for discussion of items pursuant to RSA 91A:3, Roman numeral 2, A, B, D, and L. Joanna?
Joanna Woodcomb, yes.
Callahan, yes.
Athos, yes.
Nancy Carter, yes?
Jenny Chamberlain, yes.
Thank you all. We are in non-public.